Elena stood completely still at the entrance of the grand restaurant, feeling painfully out of place beneath the glittering chandelier that sparkled like falling stars. Her breath formed a soft tremble on her lips, and beside her, holding tightly to her fingers, was her 5-year-old son, Misha, wide-eyed and nervous, clutching a small toy car against his chest as if it were a shield. This was not how blind dates were supposed to begin. Blind dates were meant for hopeful introductions, shy smiles, maybe even flirtation, not for single mothers who showed up with their child. But Elena had no other choice. Her babysitter had abruptly cancelled, and leaving her son alone was unthinkable. She had considered calling off the date, yet something inside her, a voice that had grown tired of loneliness and survival, urged her to try, just one more time. She walked to the hostess stand with hesitant steps. The marble floor echoed her footsteps like gentle drumbeats announcing her arrival. People turned to glance at her, some with curiosity, some with silent judgment. She felt every look like a weight on her shoulders. I'm here for a reservation," Elena said softly. Under the name Volkov. The hostess glanced at the guest list, smiling professionally. But the smile slowly faded when she noticed Misha standing beside her. Elena's heartbeat thundered in her ears. She could feel the familiar sting of shame rising, memories of past dates who had walked away the moment they learned she was not a woman seeking romance, but a mother seeking acceptance. "I brought my son," she said suddenly, before the hostess could ask. Her voice cracked. Is that okay?" For a moment, the world seemed to pause. Misha tugged at her sleeve, whispering, "Mommy, are we in trouble?" Elena knelt down to meet his eyes, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "No, sweetheart, we're just here to meet someone. Be on your best behavior, all right?" The hostess hesitated, not out of cruelty, but surprise. She stepped aside to check with someone, possibly the man Elena was here to meet. Elena's stomach twisted. What if he refused? What if he stood up and left without even giving her the decency of a conversation? She had faced rejection before. It wasn't new, but this time felt different. This time, her son would witness it too. She thought of turning around. She thought of running. But then she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the polished glass door. Her tired eyes, her carefully braided hair, her one good dress that she had ironed twice to make sure it looked perfect. She had spent years sacrificing every dream for her child. Tonight, she wasn't asking for luxury or pity, only a chance. Just as Elena reached for the door handle to leave, the hostess returned. "Mr. Volkov is waiting. Please follow me," she said politely. Elena exhaled slowly, her hand trembling as she adjusted her grip on Misha's hand. With one final whispered prayer in her heart, Elena stepped forward, not knowing that this single step was about to change both their lives forever. Elena's footsteps grew slower as she and Misha followed the hostess through the opulent dining hall. Soft music floated in the air, the gentle notes of a violin mingling with the clinking of crystal glasses. Golden light shimmered from chandeliers above, casting a warm glow over elegantly dressed diners who whispered behind menus. Some looked up, first at Elena, then at the little boy beside her. Their expressions flickered with curiosity, confusion, even amusement. Elena felt every stare like a blade against her confidence. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, yet her chin remained lifted. She had learned long ago that dignity was not about how others saw you, but how you carried yourself when they did. Still, tonight, her heart beat with a terrified rhythm. At the far end of the room sat a man alone at a table reserved for two. His posture was straight, powerful, as though even sitting down he commanded the space. Tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in an elegant dark suit, this was Alexander Volkov, the youngest CEO in Moscow's elite business circle. Newspapers called him ruthless, reporters called him untouchable, investors called him a genius. Elena only saw a man she was certain would stand up and leave. Alexander looked up. His eyes were cool and assessing, a storm gray that seemed to miss nothing. Elena's steps faltered. She opened her mouth to apologize, to explain, but before she could speak, Misha squeezed her hand, hiding partially behind her leg. The restaurant fell into a hush. But what happened next silenced not only the room, but Elena's fears. Alexander stood, not abruptly, not with shock or offense. He rose slowly, purposefully, as if meeting an honored guest. His gaze moved past Elena, and landed directly on Misha. To Alina's astonishment, Alexander's expression softened. The intimidating businessman, known for his unshakable composure, bent gently to one knee so he was eye level with the child. "Hello," he said softly, as if speaking to royalty. "You must be Misha." Misha blinked in surprise, clutching his toy car tighter. No man, not even relatives, had ever spoken to him like this, kindly, sincerely. Alexander smiled, a gentle curve of lips that seemed completely opposite of his public image. "You like cars?" he asked. "I have a collection in my office. Some of them can even race across the floor faster than lightning." Misha's eyes widened. "Really? Faster than lightning? Faster than thunder, too?" Alexander said with a playful seriousness. Soft chuckles rippled across the room. People who had moments ago judged were now watching in disbelief. Elena stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat. No rejection, no judgment, not even hesitation. Alexander stood and pulled out a seat, not for Elena first, but for Misha. "A gentleman always seats the youngest guest first," Alexander remarked calmly, as though this was the most natural thing in the world. Elena couldn't speak. Something inside her shifted, something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. As Misha climbed into his chair, Alexander turned to Elena, his eyes warm, his voice deep and reassuring. "I'm glad you both could make it," he said. "Please, sit. We have much to talk about." In that moment, Elena realized this wasn't going to be an ordinary dinner. This was the beginning of something she never dared to dream of. Elena sat across from Alexander, her hands gently folded in her lap as she watched Misha play with a small puzzle Alexander had asked the waiter to bring. The restaurant no longer felt intimidating, it had somehow softened, as if the walls themselves were listening. Yet, Elena's heart remained cautious. Kindness like this was rare, and often temporary. Alexander observed her quietly, not the way a businessman studies a deal, but the way a human studies another soul. His silence wasn't cold, it was patient. The waiter poured sparkling water and stepped away. Elena ran her fingers along the edge of her glass, unsure how to begin. The weight of unspoken truths pressed against her chest until she could no longer pretend. "I suppose I should explain," she said softly. Alexander nodded once, encouraging her. "I didn't plan to bring my son tonight," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "My babysitter canceled at the last minute, and I didn't want to be rude by not showing up." She paused, glancing at Misha, whose laughter briefly lit her face with tenderness. "But more than that, I don't hide the fact that I'm a mother. Because everything I do, every decision I make, it's all for him." Alexander's eyes did not waver. He didn't flinch. He didn't sigh or glance at his watch like so many others had. Encouraged, Elena continued, "When my husband died in a car accident, I was 3 months pregnant. The world changed for me that day. I lost my best friend, my partner, and my sense of safety all at once. And when I held Misha for the first time, I promised him I would never let him feel the emptiness I felt." Her voice broke. She quickly wiped a tear before it fell. People see a single mother and think, burden. They don't see the strength, the sacrifice, the endless nights. She hesitated, then added quietly, "They don't see the love." For a long moment, the only sound was the distant music and the soft ticking of a clock on the far wall. Then Alexander spoke, his voice lower now, threaded with something she couldn't identify. "When I was 8, he said, my father walked out. One morning, he put on his coat, promised to bring me a toy car, and never returned. My mother worked 3 jobs to feed me. She gave up her dreams so I could build mine." He paused, eyes momentarily distant, filled with memory. "Everything I am today exists because a single mother refused to give up on her child." Elena's breath caught. Alexander looked at Misha, who was giggling softly while assembling the puzzle. There was no pity in Alexander's eyes, only deep, unwavering respect. "Strength is not always loud," Alexander said, turning back to Elena. "Sometimes, it walks quietly into a restaurant, holding her son's hand, ready to face the world alone, even when she shouldn't have to." Elena blinked, stunned. The walls she had built to protect her heart began to crack, not from pressure, but from the warmth she never expected to receive. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them, not romance, not obligation, but recognition. 2 lives shaped by struggle. Two hearts softened by sacrifice. And perhaps, two destinies quietly beginning to align. The evening was unfolding peacefully, with conversations flowing gently like a soft river under moonlight. Elena felt herself relax in a way she hadn't in years. For once, she wasn't rushing between responsibilities or putting out fires of survival, she was simply present. And Misha, her precious boy, was smiling. That alone felt like a gift. Alexander had ordered food that Misha would enjoy. Soft dumplings, mashed potatoes shaped like stars, and a warm chocolate drink. He didn't just tolerate the boy's presence, he embraced it. He asked Misha questions, listened carefully to his answers, and even laughed when the boy proudly showed his toy car, doing stunts, on the edge of the table. Elena watched in silent awe. No man had ever shown interest in knowing her son before. They would smile politely, out of obligation, but their eyes always betrayed discomfort. Yet Alexander looked at Misha not as a burden, but as a child worthy of time and joy. Elena's heart, already fragile from years of loneliness, felt something she feared, hope. Just as she was about to speak, the restaurant lights dimmed. A hush fell over the room. Misha looked around, puzzled. "Mama, what's happening?" Before Elena could answer, a group of servers approached their table, carrying a cake. A small, beautifully decorated cake with white frosting and blue ribbons. On it were the words, "Happy birthday, Misha." Elena froze. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. She looked at Misha, his mouth open, eyes wide with disbelief. He whispered, "Mama, my birthday, you remembered." Tears flooded her eyes instantly, not out of guilt, but out of heartbreak. In the chaos of working overtime, paying bills, and preparing for this meeting, she had forgotten. She had told herself she would celebrate with him the following weekend because she simply couldn't afford anything today. Elena turned to Alexander with trembling lips. "How did you?" But before she could finish, Alexander gently placed a hand over hers. The touch was not romantic, it was human. Compassionate. "I make it a point to know important things about the people I meet," he said softly. "This is not just dinner. This is a life, and every life deserves to be celebrated, especially one that has only just begun." Misha looked at Alexander with pure wonder. "Is it really for me?" Alexander smiled. "Only if you promise me one thing." Misha's eyebrows lifted. "What?" "That you make a wish not just for yourself, but for your mother." A collective sigh moved through the room. Some diners even wiped their eyes. It was as if the entire restaurant had become part of this sacred moment. The cake was placed before Misha. Tiny candles flickered with hope. Elena covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. She was embarrassed, but also deeply touched. No man had ever looked at her son like this. No man had ever gone out of his way to make him feel special. Misha closed his eyes. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, in a clear and innocent voice, the little boy said, "I wish that Mama never cries again." Elena broke, not from sadness, but from an overwhelming surge of love and gratitude. As the candles went out, it was not just a wish being made. It was a silent promise forming in Alexander's heart, a promise that would change all their lives forever. Sunlight streamed gently through the tall glass windows of Volkov Enterprises, casting a golden glow across the conference room. But this was not an ordinary corporate meeting. Cameras were set up, reporters filled the space, and a palpable atmosphere of anticipation moved through the air like electricity. At the head of the room stood Alexander Volkov, no longer just a powerful CEO, but a man with a purpose far deeper than profit. Beside him stood Elena, her heart pounding not from fear, but from a newfound strength she had never known existed in her. As Alexander adjusted the microphone, his gaze fell briefly on Elena and Misha, who sat nearby. The little boy was drawing pictures with colored pencils Alexander had placed on the table just for him. A family portrait, a tall man, a smiling mother, and a small boy holding both their hands, was slowly forming beneath his tiny fingers. Alexander began to speak, his voice commanding yet gentle. "Today," he said, "is not a business day. Today is a promise to every single mother who has ever felt unseen, unheard, or unworthy." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Reporters looked at one another, intrigued. Alexander continued, his tone steady, filled with emotion rarely seen from a man of his stature. I was raised by a woman who sacrificed everything so that I could stand where I stand today. She never had anyone to help her. She never asked for sympathy, only opportunity. And when I saw that same strength in Elena, when I saw her fight not just to survive, but to give her child love, dignity, and hope, I was reminded of my own mother. Elena felt emotion swell in her chest. She tried to remain composed, but tears gathered in her eyes. "It is my honor," Alexander said, turning to the audience, to announce the launch of the Misha Foundation, a global initiative that will provide financial support, housing assistance, education, and career programs for single mothers. Not as charity, but as a tribute to their strength. There was a collective gasp. Flashing cameras flickered like stars. "And," he continued, glancing toward Elena, "this foundation is not named after me. It is named after the little boy, who reminded me that love is not an obstacle, it is the greatest foundation for any future." Misha looked up from his drawing, surprised to hear his own name. Elena pressed a hand to her heart, overwhelmed. The room erupted into applause, thunderous, heartfelt, echoing with admiration. But Elena didn't hear the noise. She only saw Alexander, standing tall, eyes soft, expression open and honest. As the applause faded, Alexander stepped away from the podium and approached Elena. He didn't care about the cameras or the watching world. He knelt before Misha, the same way he had that first night in the restaurant. "Misha," he said softly, "every strong foundation needs a hero. Will you be mine?" Misha grinned and threw his arms around Alexander's neck. In that moment, Elena knew, this was no longer about a blind date. It was no longer about past pain. It was about destiny. A destiny built not on wealth or power, but on love, compassion, and the courage to embrace the unexpected. As tears flowed, not from sorrow but from joy, Elena whispered to herself, "This isn't the life I hoped for. It's the life I never believed I could have." And for the first time in many years, she believed in tomorrow.